Hello, my name's Sean Burke, and I'd like to talk to you about maritime shipping safety standards and guidelines. This is for Professor Buckaloo's Transportation Systems class at Ivy Tech, and the reason I chose this subject was because I find it pretty interesting that 80+% of the international trade in the world goes through a ship at some point or is handled through maritime shipping, and it's just amazing how much cargo they can carry. It's mind-boggling, really, and figured there'd be quite a few regulations and things that would be easily available, and that there were a plethora, in fact, to the point where I can't really cover them all here, so we're just going to touch on them lightly. A huge component of the guidelines that maritime shipping follows comes from SOLAS, and this information comes from the International Maritime Organization's website, imo.org. SOLAS is an abbreviation for the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, and funnily enough, this was actually created all the way back in 1914 in response to the unfortunate event with the Titanic. And another subsection of this that is very important to the safety of sailors and so on and so forth is the International Safety Management Code. We'll touch on that here in just a few. SOLAS has a broad range of regulations, 17 chapters in total, with a couple subdivisions for the maritime industry. It covers everything from the construction of the ships. This has to do with the load-bearing structures, so on and so forth. There used to be single hull ships, and now we have double hulls, and so on and so forth. Fire protection and prevention, obviously where our fire extinguishers and other firefighting devices are going to be, and them being clear at all times. Life-saving appliances and arrangements. It's going to be things like defibrillators and lifeboats, radio comms. Has to do with correspondence between shore or even other ships. The International Safety Management Code. This one had to come from marineinsight.com for this information. It was intended to provide a standard for the management and operation of ships and to try and prevent pollution from that. It's not a very specific code. It's purposefully done that way so that it's broadly applicable to as many people and organizations as possible. It does require that you have a safety management system to be in place on every commercial vessel. This is essentially to give you a plan of action, your emergency responses, think fire escape plans for a factory. It also has a safety environmental protection policy built into it. A lot of companies actually hand this back out within 15 days to have their sailors confirm that they understand and agree to do so. And it also makes sure that there's a clear chain of command or communication both on board the ship but also to the ones on shore so they can always have appropriate orders to follow. Bulk carrier specialties. These are codes and amendments to SOLAS that were made specifically for bulk carriers. Our specific title is the International Maritime Solid Bulk Cargoes Code, abbreviated as IMSBC. This amendment was done in 2008. It wasn't expected to go into force until January of 2011. It did replace the Code of Safe Practice for solid bulk cargoes, and that was in 1965 that code was adopted as a recommendation. Uh, Primarily, this has to do with how the carrier is storing its cargo, and the reason being, if it's not loaded properly, much the same way that a trailer is loaded improperly when you're driving down the road with a truck, it can lead to difficulties in maneuvering, or in the case of a ship, capsizing, straining the hull to the point where it actually splits, so on and so forth, things like that. And the International Association of Classification Societies was actually called in to do more inspections on bulk carriers in order to determine whether or not what they had put into place was sufficient. And they actually did find that it wasn't, and they had to make further amendments, and it's an ongoing process for this. The freefall lifeboats were made as a requirement in December of 2004, and in November of 1977, the safe loading and unloading of bulk carriers was another amendment that was made, and this resulted primarily from a heavy loss of life, as well as a lot of carriers disappearing, some of them with no trace, and of course this is a pretty hefty financial burden to find, and a lot of it stemmed from being loaded improperly. Really short section for me. High-speed craft. This is going to be your speedboats traveling at a high rate of speed. They're also capable of international travel. Another interesting one is tanker specifics. Think fuel tankers, oil tankers, so on and so forth. Again, this information comes from the International Maritime Organization website. The fire safety provisions for tankers are a lot more stringent, such as an inert gas system. It's required on all new tankers, and most existing ones have it as well when this was implemented. So what that is they'll fill tanks with inert gas and store it around oil, so that if a fire does break out, they have more time to stop it, since it is very tight, confined spaces, and it's pretty flammable cargo. Another thing that was put into place was the duplication of steering equipment for them. Can't have it just willy-nilly running out and not being able to be controlled. And in addition to that, they implemented tankers needing to have emergency towing equipment attached to them, so that should both sets of steering gear fail, they can still be towed out of place. And that was in 1996 that was implemented. So the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution by Ships, abbreviated as MARPOL, has requirements for ballast tanks, which assist the tanker in floating or sinking further into the water depending on their cargo load. On their return trips, when they're empty, they are required to load their ballast tanks with water and position them in the most likely spot to be impacted should they suffer from a collision. And MARPOL also went further and banned carrying of oil in the 4 pink tank, which I have a picture of that, since I'm not very understanding of the structure of ships. They also had single hulls phased out due to them just being much more prone to devastating destruction from collisions and so on and so forth. And that resulted from incidents involving Erica and the Prestige ships. And here we can look and see that the 4-peak tank is located at the very front of the ship and is considered just entirely too dangerous to have such a contaminating fluid as oil to be put in it. Overall, what I learned from this assignment was that even though a lot of the regulations that we would take for granted were made in reaction at a lot of points, the organization, the IMO, is constantly adjusting and attempting to take a preventative or proactive approach to facilitating increased safety measures and to prevent catastrophic failures like things like the ExxonMobil incident with the oil leaks and the BPs and so on and so forth like that, to really kind of make things a better world. So thank you for your time. I hope you have a good evening.